I think what's quite important to the Scandinavian tradition is kind of the humanism that has the social democratic society tradition that is in the whole of Scandinavia, that there's a great respect for individuals and for people in general. So I would say that our projects are quite centered around people and the sort of well-being of the end user in architecture. That's something that we consider greatly when we do projects in both urbanism and architecture. Then there's the whole detailing and the way of using materials that actually, to a large degree, was imported from Japan in the 60s. You have this sort of wave of Danish design and architecture in the 60s that is something that we are still, I think, deeply inspired by in Scandinavia. But that's actually something that was brought in partly from Asia. We have a big focus on making sort of meeting points between different user groups. So if we're doing, let's say, schools or institutions, we are quite focused on how that will meet the urban realm and the public life outside of the buildings, and that might end up with sort of multi-functionality and spaces that are flexible, but it's not something that we have in a clear formula on how we work with that. Basically, I would say that changes from project to project. I think it's absolutely possible to scale that model up. It's probably easier to realize if it's a little bit larger than the unit we've done so far with 25 homes. So what that would mean to larger communities would be that you actually start getting new local communities around food production, energy production, waste management, and mobility solutions that you now have sort of in the public realm. That would be something that you could manage locally on neighborhood scale. And I think that could be a social model to create new types of communities in cities. The model that we are working with is that you have people working with the food production, so you don't necessarily have to take part in that. So it's not sort of moving back to medieval days. On the contrary, it's moving the services and the high level of comfort and high level of control of your environment closer, but without losing comfort. I think it's the models that we are building up are rather on the technology part. The architecture should change, so you shouldn't move that exact model to China or Northern Africa. It would have to change accordingly. You had in the 60s, when the sort of modernistic wave was really moving fast, you were sort of repeating the same type of buildings all over, first in sort of in Europe, and then it also spread to various other climate zones. And it's kind of the same social model put into so many different social and climate conditions. And it's not, I think, the best way to spread models. It has to adapt to local conditions of culture and climate and so forth. Yeah, the vision of that project is that it should enable the big population that are moving to the cities in the next 50 years. You're expecting 2.5 billion people to move into megacities all over the world. And these people might be better off living in smaller communities where you actually have the supply of clean water, energy and food built into your neighborhood rather than moving into huge suburban areas where you depend on other people to supply these necessities. So in that sense, there's a level of empowerment that is highly relevant to especially the developing world, where you have people moving away from the countryside and into new suburban areas. We think about it as a prototype for a lot of projects, and I mean there are so many ways that you can sort of think about other models of local food supply, also local energy and water supply and waste management. This is one out of many models, but we do consider this as a prototype that could be distributed to Earth in general.